she was basing it on a 22-month growth period that the salmon are resident in this drought, is 69 school buses. That's the size of it. So imagine taking 69 school buses and putting them on the bottom of Mahone Bay Harbor. So feces, it's industrial scale, it's the sea lice, the antibiotics. Most of these slides are from our website, twinbays.ca. 10 minutes, we're quite limited in what we can talk about, but go and check it out and you'll see. And we're trying to create a resource in an effort to achieve transparency in this debate. A resource for peer-reviewed scientific articles like those produced by Inca and others. So twinbays.ca. Sid, is this your slide or my slide?
You can take it.
Well, I mean, if you just think, well, we've found, like, Sid and I met at the Tim Hortons in Tantallon in like December 1st or December 2nd. And this thing has taken off like crazy. Up at the Mahone Bay Center on Sunday last, 300 people. It was absolutely crazy. And this morning in Chester, there were probably 50 people in that little tiny gallery. Lots of lobster fishermen and rich people, the masters of industry, are all signing on. One rich person who will go unnamed when he discovered that they were going to put these nets, the diameter is half a football field. They're 50 meters across, and they are 22 meters deep. And the minimum depth, as Sid showed you, is 25 meters, leaving a 3 meter gap, minimum 3 meter gap between the bottom of the net and the floor of the ocean.
That's for the poop.
That's for the poop. I have pictures that they'll be available on the twinbays.ca. Okay, Sid, over to you. We must be running out of time. How are we doing for time? 2 minutes.
We can do it. Next slide, please. Jeff and I went on a tour with some other people from our group. We went to 4 mind-blowing industries in Nova Scotia. We went to Pristine in Chester, Nova Scotia, where they deconstruct plastic into its component parts of diesel oil and some other stuff. And they make pellets from black garbage bags. You all know this. They're going to reduce the Chester landfill by 90%. Some of those food pellets and the diesel go to a firm called Sustainable Blue, land-based fish farming right here in Nova Scotia. They have perfected in Nova Scotia the technology to filter not only fresh water that the young salmon live in, but the salt water that the older salmon live in. This is groundbreaking technology.
Can I interrupt 1 second? Because people don't understand about the Sustainable Blues technology is unique in land-based closed containment, as you'll discover at the Unity lunch. They don't keep pumping seawater up, let the salmon then clean it and then pump it back into the bay. They put water in their cisterns and they keep it there. It never leaves the plant. There's no recycling out into nature. It's all self-contained. That is unique in land-based closed containment.
And invented in Nova Scotia.
It's our technology.
This guy Oberland, he is literally a rocket scientist from Nassau, but his wife got a job at Dell and he followed her to Nova Scotia. He is growing soldier flies. They're like a mayfly, but they would die if they ever escaped. They increase their body mass by 6,000% in 2 weeks. And he turns that into protein. And that goes to food and also food to feed salmon. The other one we went to is called Small Foods. They have come up from California with a process to grow algae in the dark and refine it into protein that is an exact match for animal protein. Can you imagine the worldwide benefits of this? Each one of these companies has either attracted people, geniuses to Nova Scotia who have employing very well-paid technical people, or they've made the same kind of people stay in Nova Scotia. So we're at a crossroads. We can pollute the ocean with regular old-fashioned fish farming, or we can save and feed the world with these wonderful high-tech jobs. Now you might say, like my son-in-law says, why can't we do both? You can't do both because the geniuses that we're attracting are here because Nova Scotia is pristine environment is still relatively unspoiled. There's a great way of life. They love it here. If we start polluting our beautiful, pristine oceans, they're not going to come. Like, these guys can live anywhere in the world. So why are we here? We're here because it seems to me an unrelenting government at the provincial level is foisting this on a people that don't want it. The only way we can convince the government that the people don't want it is for everybody to say we don't want it. And if this council, in their wisdom over the next little while, could send a message to the province that you don't want it here, you would be in line with Digby Council, Queen's Municipality of Queen's Council, and hopefully several others that we're talking to on our circuit. So please.
Thank you for that. Just before we turn it over to council, so the Oberlin agriculture,
Yes,
if someone says that ain't rocket science, I can say, oh yes it is.
it is. It is. I was in the guy's office and he's writing on his desk in whiteout. And he says, oh yeah, that's what we used to do at NASA. We had a beautiful idea. Before it left our minds, we just wrote it on the desk with whatever the heck came there.
Council, do you have questions? Councilor Carver?
Yeah, please. I asked this question earlier with Mr. Bootlier. It's about the role of the ARB, the Aquaculture Review Board, which I understand has a membership of 3,
Yes.
appointed in 2017. And I also understand that all 3 members of the board are from the city, from Halifax, or Halifax area. We're being urged to lobby our MLAs and our the government.
Yes.
But what is the role of the Aquaculture Review Board in the decision-making process about the options? And what is Minister Colwell's role? How does it work?
Well, the entire process is overseen by the government. But one of the things that was cherry-picked from the recommendations by the Dole-Leahy Commission was the creation of this board, which is arm's length and autonomous. It is appointed by the government, but it makes decisions on its own. And I'm sure the 3 people, you probably read their bios, I did too, I don't really know them, but there they are, and they like any one of us, they would do their best. They signed up to the ABC, the agencies, boards, and commissions, volunteers, and they were chosen from a list, and there they are. One guy has aquacultural engineering background, the other don't seem to have much background in it, but I mean, compared to the Canada Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board, I think they're beautifully objective in this process. I think it's an improvement. Nova Scotia has made some improvements from the Dole-Leahy Commission in the regulation, the exercise of regulation. It's better than it was back in the Wild West of the beginnings of this, from 2009 to 2013. It's better, but so much has changed. For example, the perfection and evolution of sustainable blues technology, for one. The second is we encouraged, when we created Dole-Leahy, we encouraged them to model our regulation on the regulation in Norway, and that was not realized by a long shot. In Norway, for example, every single net pen in the water off of Norway, you can access, we could access it right now online and see the water temperature, the number of fish, what they've been fed, the antibiotics that they're getting in, the amount of poop that's coming out. All that data is all available and totally transparent to anyone. So in Norway, where they put the nets in deep fjords that are many meters deep, you can test it. In Nova Scotia, on the Scotian shelf, where we are, where there's limited depth, it's a totally different ball game, and we don't have that kind of transparency. The regulation is hidden, and we have an option at hand. The closed containment option is at hand. We have perfected it. We can build it here. We can enable communities like Mahone Bay Antigonish and Berwick with the wind project, we can create collectives of communities to rejuvenate the rural economy in this province. If we capitalized on that model, we can do it. We don't have to clear cut, steal the krill and from off of Chile and bring it in for fish food, so that stealing poor man's fish to make the rich man's salmon. We don't have to do that. We have alternatives. That's not really answering your question. Does anybody have a soapbox?
Sorry, I'm using it.
Oh.
Just for point of interest, I understand it takes something in the order of 3.5 kilograms of fish feed to grow 1 kilogram.
That's right,
produce
Joe.
1 kilogram of salmon.
Yeah, it depends on the age. I think that I just got some stuff from Inka Milewski about that, so I think that number maybe isn't over the whole life of the salmon. I'm not sure.
But as you call it, it's the poor man's fish that we're
That's
taking
what they're feeding now.
to feed the salmon.
That's the key to this model is
Yes.
this stuff is made in the breeding soldier flies, recycling garbage. There's one other element on there, which is, you'll see in the lower left where it says fish in the fields. That's an interesting, where it's an ancient technology. It's hard to even call it a technology, but in rice paddies, they after the rice is harvested, they put smolts, and the fish love the stubble, the submerged stubble in the rice paddies. They gobble it up, grow fat. The fish is harvested, ground up, mixed with the soldier fly and with the stuff from small foods, the algae, into a complete food, and that is fish food that apparently is very successful. So that's a smart exercise.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. As a disclosure, I just wanted to say that I have attended 2 Twin Bays meetings as an observer, as a means to get additional information on this and better understand this issue. I just wanted to pick up on a question about the regulatory oversight. It's been suggested by people who are inclined to support this project that the provincial government, who has jurisdiction in this part of Canada, is a leader in environmental protections, and suggests that in order for this project to proceed, that extensive environmental studies would need to be done to ensure ocean and coastal protection. And I wonder if you can speak to what environmental studies would be required before CERMAC or another aquaculture firm would be allowed to proceed.
That's such a good question, because, well, again, in the Norwegian model, was our recommendation that a detailed analysis of every inch of the Nova Scotia coast should have been made before a single license was issued, as was done in Norway. In Norway, prior to, I think it was 1969, that process was undertaken. It was the Wild West there, and there was all kinds of craziness going on with net cages. They stopped it, they put in a moratorium, they devised rules, they did a survey of the entire coast of Norway, and then they came up with rules and regulations that are the most stringent in the world. But now, having gone through that process in Norway, they're starting to move their closed containment, to closed containment, land-based closed containment, and closed containment in the sea. So they're starting to see the errors of their ways, but nonetheless, they have the most stringent stuff. So to answer your question, there was a detailed survey of the coast. So that would include analysis of the benthic environment and the geology that underlies, bathymetry, the biophysical nature of the sea, the currents, the temperatures, and so forth. The species that exist there.
And this is in Norway you're describing?
No,
Canada.
I'm describing it was done in Norway, but it's what ideally would be done here and is not being done. When we met with CERMAC, we're going to meet with them again because we have some questions exactly about that. in this option period that we're now in, they're relying on existing data, which from the meeting we had with them, it's pretty thin. They're supposed to be doing an examination of the kind of level of detail that was done in Norway, and I don't think they are. I think they're using the option period to meet with municipal councils, meet with influencers, meet with groups like ours, and definitely meet with provincial politicians and convince them that what they're doing is smart and good. This is my impression. And so I think if we're going to do it, and we shouldn't, the whole world is moving to closed containment. The Norwegians themselves are building a $600 million closed containment facility in Florida. 600 million Norwegian dollars or American dollars are going to build this plant. So if they're doing it there, if BC is eliminating net cages off of BC and moving to closed containment, why are we here still putting net cages in our waters?
So just to bring it back to the study, so I just wanted to be clear whether you are aware of any study that is to be undertaken or that has been done to support the premise that it is safe and it's safe to do that with respect to protection of our coast or our ocean.
There's no, to my knowledge, there's no formalized testing, but I don't know the details of what CERMAC is undertaking. I do know that they have to do it themselves.
So there's nothing from the perspective of the Canadian or the provincial government that you're aware of?
There is, and I'm trying to remember the name of the Marine Data Resource Center or some such name that they cited in our meeting with them. They're using that data which exists, and I don't think they are adding to it. But was anybody here? Were any of you involved in the anti-net cage activities in the 2009 to 2013? Well, I certainly was. And what we found was that where it really came to a head was in Northwest Cove, where there was science presented by the likes of Inga Malewski and other scientists that were disproving, that were talking about the damage that was being done to the marine environment. And there was a stack of information. And the proponent, Cook Aquaculture, was hiring scientists, including someone from Dalhousie, John Grant, and he was producing reports as well. So you ended up with science versus science, and everybody was using words like peer reviewed, and saying, you know, my science is better than your science. And it boils down ultimately to what Sid said. It's a moral choice. It's a moral choice. You say, do I want this? Do I want to risk tourism? Do I want to risk the lobster fishery? You should have heard the lobster fishermen this morning who came to the meeting in Chester. They were extraordinary. And a guy named Vince Boutlier, his cousin, I guess. And Vince spoke so well. He's the head of the LFA in that area. He sees the damage to the lobster fishery. He believes what Inga Malewski has proven happened in Port Mattoon. The only positive stuff is coming from science that is paid for by people who have a vested interest in it being proven positive. That's my opinion. That's all my opinion. So.
Any other questions? For members of council, if you haven't seen it yet, go to YouTube and look up the Salmon Wars, or Google Salmon Wars. It's like a 45-minute video was produced in 2012 when these same questions were being asked by different people or different groups of people. You'll be amazed at the content of the video and the similarities to what's going on today.
Can I ask one more
Councillor
question?
Carver?
May I ask one more
Yes,
question?
please.
For the ocean-based contained farms, how much of the objections to open pen farms are eliminated. I mean, presumably.
Closed containment in the water.
Okay, so the poop is eliminated, but we still have the problem of the feed being brought in from South America somewhere. We still have the problem of
Well, I mean,
lice.
you could feed this.
Yes, so, yes, yes. Is it gonna be still a problem of lights?
But I don't really,
Boats,
I really
noise.
don't know anything about closed containment in the water. I don't know why you would do it, but I guess there's some logic. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
really can't
Okay.
answer that.
Just-
They know that they're doing it. I know, or I'm told that the closed containment that's happening in Norway is happening quite far off the coast. I don't know. I can't imagine it happening here for the same reasons as
Yeah.
drilling offshore. is so
Just trying to
dangerous.
visualize what it might be. Thank you.
Just one more quick question. Any truth to the tale that Norway is not issuing any new open pen permits?
I hadn't heard that specifically, but I did ask specifically if there is a trend, and the trend in Norway is no more open net pens, putting it on land. That's that they're moving towards that. And what's happening in Florida is a perfect example. I don't think we have that on our website now. We should, but there's a promotional video about what's it called? Atlantic Sapphire. Atlantic Sapphire. Google Atlantic Sapphire, and there's a little. It's kind of like the bee video. It's a very simple picture of lots of architectural renderings of what they are planning to do. But there you have it.
May I just say one thing before we wind up?
Yeah.
The government, and the minister in particular, and Hugh McKay, they're hanging their hat on the fact that we have the best regulations in the country. When people say that to me, I say, I don't care. If your regulation allows 2 million salmon to poop in my Mahone Bay, that's not even a regulation should be on the table.
Good point. Okay, well, thank you very much for receiving us. We appreciate it. And good luck with your challenge.
Thank you, it is a challenge.
I watch it every day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the chair.
Let's go to, is Adam Eakins here? There he is, hiding behind the chief's chair.
There we go.
Welcome, Deputy Chief Adam Eakins. Quarterly report, an annual summary of calls for the fire department.
I think we had about 89 calls for the year there, and there's quite a mix of them in there, as you can see. So, are any questions at all about it? Or?
I had a question. So that number of 8990 calls, is that a change, or is that pretty stable compared to other years, and also compared to other nearby fire departments?
It's around the same as last year, I think. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but we could probably look it up if we really wanted. But as far as other fire departments, I don't know what their call numbers are.
Of those fire alarm calls that were listed, how many of those, if any, would you guys characterize as false alarms?
Probably, is it false alarms as in like faulty equipment?
False alarm is in there was no smoke.
It would be probably most of them.
Interesting. Any
Somebody
repeat addresses there as well, or?
There probably is. I don't think we've had any real. I think we had a couple of calls down to like Joanne's Market this year.
Is that because of automated equipment triggering the alarm?
Automate like something like set off the fire alarm, like toaster or baking equipment. alarm company calls it straight through, and then we have to respond.
Did we not have a situation a few years ago when we were ascribing a cost to people whose unattended in-house alarm systems falsely triggered a call?
There's a bylaw, yours.
There is
Are
a
we still,
bylaw.
are we still enforcing that?
The only way the town would be able to enforce it is if we reported them to the town. And I've had discussions like that with other fire departments. And the fear of doing that is if all of a sudden we start charging people, they're gonna say, yeah, they're gonna say, the fire department's charging people for answering calls, and people aren't gonna call.
Unless it's chronic, you just let it roll.
Hmm.
You know,
Or they disconnect their automated equipment.
If I could offer an alternative to that, as a person who receives the reports from the fire department, if I were to receive the reports from the fire department of where the calls were, as they come to council, within my department is a bylaw enforcement officer, and that might address that issue. Maybe that's something
We
that
had
the
3
three
or
of us
4
can sit
calls
down.
from the same address sort of thing, maybe.
Yeah, maybe the three of us can
sometimes
sit
they're
down.
cook related, you know, cooking related.
And, not to say that someone doesn't have a new system that's glitching or something like that, but as the mayor mentioned, we did have one location in particular that was particularly problematic for the RCMP, actually, just an absent owner that was always a problem. So we certainly don't want our volunteer firefighters having to run out in the middle of the night all the time because of a persistent problem that's not being addressed. So if it's, maybe the three of us could sit down and have a chat.
Especially those automated ones. I mean, as you say, like
Well,
a
these
kitchen
fire
smoke,
alarms are all automated.
Yeah.
That's how we get them, is through the fire alarms are automated. That's what they're classified, those are what those are.
On the whole, though, most people they'll put their equipment right if it is faulty.
Yeah.
They understand that we are volunteers and apologetic about it.
In our last quarterly report, you mentioned that you had some concerns about the Civic address signs and the fact that we were running into some problems with signs not being available. And I believe that's coming up either later today or in a future later today. So
That's civic sign.
the Civic signs, the Civic number sign. So we took that away. Thank you very much for that last meeting, and I think it's being addressed later on this meeting.
It took a little longer than I had anticipated when we spoke.
So if there's anything else you'd like, we'll get to it. About 3 months. We'll
I
get
didn't
to
bring my list.
Any other questions?
it. Thank you very
Okay.
much. That's good.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Egan. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks. See you later.
You're now confirmed for another year at the recent election at the fire department?
I am indeed.
And Mr. Chief,
Yes.
congratulations to both of you.
coming to see you.
That's right.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thanks,
See ya.
I'll talk to you later.
item next, correspondence action items. A note from Georgia West.
I asked Councillor Noss about the location of this situation. He informs me that it's the Sweet Ride building.
The bike shop.
So I'll just comment, and this may seem like a purely administrative matter, and generally we would consider it such. So Derek does follow up on all of these. These are common issues that we run into. But whereas this letter was addressed to the council, we did put it on here. We have received one other one in a similar vein this winter that was addressed to the administration, and I would think that we can address this one the same way as we address others. But we did want council to be aware of it, so it's up here.
Councillor O'Neill.
I don't have any particular comment or opinion on the content of it, but I just wanted to point out that the penmanship of this letter is beautiful.
It's actually reminded me, in our centennial book, we have a few excerpts of some of the business of council from the first 10 years, and a lot of it looked a lot like that. It wasn't up on a TV screen, but it looked a lot like that.
What kind of cost are we looking for to facilitate repairs to this building? Is it a negligible amount
Yeah,
of
I
money?
mean,
or-
we've had repairs in the hundreds of dollars in this location, I think, a couple of times before.
Have we figured out why it happens year after year?
I mean, it's always a discussion, you know, the operators are quite skilled, but they're working in difficult conditions, they're in, you know, they're in a hurry. That corner is very tight, the sidewalk isn't significantly wide there.
This is where the bridge abuts the Sweet Ride Cycle building?
So Public Works doesn't necessarily have a significant hope at the moment for a change that will necessarily protect them from this happening again. But we are doing a transportation plan, we are talking about accessibilities, we are talking about standards. I don't see a lot of room there to affect an improvement.
Yeah.
But obviously if we found a way somehow to, you know, widen that sidewalk or anything
Yeah.
down the road, then it would also address this issue.
There's a picture of that building with the original bridge. It's got to be a little over. Kelly might have a copy of it, 120 years old, I think. Many councillors over many decades have been dealing with that corner.
Can we get a 10-year quote on repairs to the building
Yeah.
or something? I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I just find it a bit difficult to
Yeah.
accept that, well, we hit it every year because it's there. You know, there's got to be some way to mark it, an extra 3 inches on a painted wooden stick or something to stay away from the, I don't know.
Well, Derek is going to look into what we can do, so
Okay.
I'll let you guys know if we.
I
come
would
up
like
with
to hear
something
the
in
solution that he proposes for that.
Seems like it's happening different times in the same year, so.
Okay.
Well, we won't repair it till the spring.
Yeah.
Oh,
The same damage.
Let's go on to item next. This is around asset management. Mr. CAO, would you like to enlighten us?
Yeah, well, just as a little bit of background, I think the councillors are aware, but we participated in the AIM Network's cohort program, which in a number of staff persons, Luke, Maureen, myself, Derek, as well as some members of council who are on the asset management committee, so Richard and David, and at least one session or two on community engagement. Penny came along as well. So those sessions and the behind the scenes support and spreadsheets and other work has been, I think, quite instrumental in assisting us in developing our asset management program, getting the committee to the place that it is at today. You know, hopefully in the course of this coming year, we will be taking that further and finalizing some, you know, draft documents around our different asset classes and starting to actually move that into the realm of supporting our budgets, which, you know, in the early years, it's a bit difficult to take that information and translate it directly into budgets. And I would say that the context of this letter here from Daisy, who's the director of the AIM Network, is that AIM went out to FCM, which, as you know, funded the majority of the previous year's program, to request a continuation of that program. And FCM said no. FCM was willing to fund and is funding MAMP to gather another round of units that are at the beginning of their asset management journey. And there are about a half dozen signed up to that program already. But what we had heard, what the AIM Network had heard from other units that have participated in the first round of the program, is that they wanted to be able to continue with the work, they wanted to continue collaborating, they appreciated the support and the opportunities for networking, and so AIM Network is trying to continue that group as a cohort 2.0 program, but unfortunately without FCM financial assistance. So this is a proposal that is going to all of the units that participated in the previous program to continue a program essentially to support us in the next stage of our asset management planning over the coming year. But without FCM funding, the full program cost for the town of Mahone Bay is estimated at around $8,000. I know that a couple of units have signed on already. This is a 2020-21 fiscal year expense. This is not a current fiscal year expense. However, in order to make arrangements for the program, Daisy is requesting the level of interest at this time. So I would certainly endorse this. I will note, although I get no financial compensation, the council's aware of it, I am a member of the AIM Network Board of Directors. But in that sense, I think this is a definite benefit to the town to continue having the support of the AIM Network with regards to our committee's work.
The $8,000 that you mentioned, Would that be for Mahone Bay by itself, or with the whole group that we did?
That would be for our part by
That's
ourselves, and
just
each of
us,
the
and
other.
you're at the asset management committee,
Yeah.
or whoever, or would it be counselors? Would it be the asset management committee?
So it's the same kind of deal as last time, where we would have a number of members within reason. I think that the intention this time would be to, I would hope, to ask the committee, the public members of the committee, if any of them are available to participate. I think it would be very educational for them. And then, as previous, if there was a session of a particular interest to a member of council who's not on the asset management committee, we could probably make that arrangement as well.
And one of the pieces around this is that the assets that we have not yet addressed in terms of data for the spreadsheets will get populated as a result of this process. Okay, which kind of brings us full circle with all of the data identification that needs to be done around the asset management piece. No, Richard had his hand up next, Deputy Mayor, sir.
Just, you mentioned about the public members of the committee. Would it be possible, where they haven't had any training really, to get them into the first part, cohort part, which is a paid-for program, to get those members in on that part of it?
Yeah, we're so the first cohort that we did, because it is going to run in the same kind of 16-month window. The cohort that is beginning now will run parallel to this one. So in order to get them up to speed more quickly, we're looking at some online or quicker refresher type training. There is some training that has been developed through NSFM. I'm talking with Debbie about possibly accessing that, but I agree with you that we do need to bridge some of the public members to get them onto this, and there just won't be an opportunity to run them through the whole cohort one program.
So this funding will facilitate workshops where training will occur so that we can undertake the data collection, or it will facilitate the actual data collection.
It's a little bit of both. As it notes there, data collection is not required. Now, we have, at the same time as this is taking place, you'll note in the report to council, we've resubmitted on request from FCM our MAMP, Municipal Asset Management Program application from September of 2018. And so that was requested by January 17th. They're supposed to get back to us by tomorrow. That funding is to cover, as we previously discussed, data collection in the areas that we have still a lack. So electrical, buildings and facilities, recreational, park, natural assets, fleet vehicles. So that would happen simultaneously with this if we do get the approval. And what this adds to that is a level of interpretation of that data. So while we collect the data, between each of these workshops, the AIM network has tapped Land Info and Hatch Consulting. They do kind of crunching the numbers into workshop format reports that we then work through in the workshop. So there's not data collection in this, but it is not just the 4 workshops, it's the 4 workshops and then the creation of certain deliverables between those workshops using the data that we've collected. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does.
So now that's how they come up with the $8,000 for buying service. Right, okay, I didn't know. It was assessment thing or whatever, we're buying.
No, it's a
service.
straight cost.
Okay.
So essentially when they applied the FCM, they had a total cost. They asked the FCM to underwrite 80% of it.
Yeah.
We would only have had to pay
Yeah.
20% of that, but they didn't get it, so the full 8,000 is what. Yeah.
Well, it's an issue that's gotta go to budget, so.
Well, that's the question here. Is that my suggestion would be we have an asset management budget at this point. We had one established last year. I would
These
like
are-
to
this is an
suggest that
expense, right?
council consider this is a
This isn't a capital item.
no, it's not a capital item. I would like council to consider having a standing item for asset management related costs in the budget, as we did last year. If we look at last year's expenditure for asset management, we will not have expended much of it. If we get the FCM MAP approval, we'll have some of that will be carried over to next year. If we take the carryover of our portion of the MAP support and add this to it, what we're looking at is a number in the $13,000 to $15,000 range. And currently in this year's budget, that was about where we were at about $14,000. So my suggestion is that at least for the next 2 fiscal years, we should anticipate a budget of 15,000 or less to complete the asset management work that we're doing. And I would suggest that this would be good use of it. That being said, we haven't approved that. This is my suggestion. And so, council needs to determine whether we're willing to say that, we're interested, but it's pending budget, or we are in, but still it's pending
Do we have
budget.
to have this in for?
Well, Daisy's requesting this indication, a serious willingness of support now to line up this program. But again, that being said, I'll convey the extent of support that council is willing to express. If there's a need to put the final decision to budget, but there's a strong interest, if there is, though we hope there is, we can convey that.
So if we don't hear anything tomorrow about the other funding, what does that mean?
Well,
About
I
the
mean,
agenda.
they said it would be tomorrow. I'm not sure
Or-
it'll be tomorrow, but if we hear a no response, which like I'll press them in the next few weeks if we haven't heard anything, if we hear a no response, what that means is the unspent funds need to either be allocated to do a little bit of data collection without the 80% funding, or we drop those additional pieces of data collection for the moment.
Right.
We don't have to have them completed to continue in this process, and we could come back around and apply to MAM another year for that work.
Like I kind of view them as linked projects. You know, if you're going to do the workshops to do the analysis, you pretty much you need the data. You need the dollars to gather the data. We have a meeting on the 11th of February, which is not very far away. Do you think we might hear about the funding on the data collection project by the 11th? Do you think if we deferred this decision until the 11th, we would still be able to take advantage of the opportunity, or do you think the window's closing?
I don't think there'd be any problem in delaying the discussion in terms of getting back to Daisy. In terms of whether we'll hear from them, despite the fact that they've told me that there's this specific turnaround time, we also applied in September of 2018 and didn't hear back from them until December of 2019.
Fair
so,
enough.
yeah, but we can certainly defer as to whether there be any change. But that's going to be, up to FCM.
Like, I'd be more enthusiastic if I thought it was a package.
Hmm.
We were gonna,
And we've got one half of the package
yeah,
really done now.
yeah.
And we're going to have to pursue the work that's contained in the second package.
That's just it. It's just if we're not going to be able to receive any more subsidies or funding to complete the data collection, then I'd rather see a comprehensive budget for the data collection and this dimensioned.
I can't imagine we're going to abandon it. because
No,
the
not now.
allocation money doesn't
3 years
materialize.
anyway now, right?
Well, I'll put a motion on the floor that we defer this to the next council meeting, this item.
Moved and seconded? All in favor? Defer to the 11th of
One thing I
February.
forgot to add, Chester didn't technically participate in cohort 1, but they came along through everything to support us because they provide our GIS services. They have now decided that, well, they're not formal, but by the 11th they'll probably know that they're hoping to jump right into cohort 2 for Chester, and that would also be advantageous to us because they've been supporting us. It's actually our participation in cohort 1 that brought Chester along on their program. Nick and Dan. Yeah, they didn't go to the.
Oh, they weren't at
community
mine,
consultation.
mine.
All the other ones.
Right.
All right.
Next, correspondence information items.
Motion to receive 5.1 to 5.4 in file.
Seconder? By Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, just one point on 5.1. I noticed that there's an opportunity for the Municipal Finance Corporation to fund some training to a really well-renowned conference, and you have to apply for it. But that might be something our manager of finance may want to throw his name in the hat as something if Dylan thought that might be a good idea. I know that the deadline is, it's still a couple weeks away, but there's an opportunity for $2,500 in funding for that event. And
Luke and I do review that every year, and based on family considerations and other things, whether he can attend.
Fair enough.
I know he's looking to get there one year eventually.
Okay, fair enough.
I had a question about 5.4, the NSFM Monday memo, it referred to the training that was available, the leadership training at $3,500, and I think, Mayor, that's the course that you took,
That's the one at Dalhousie.
that you,
Executive course on,
and it's whether anybody is gonna be attending that from our council, just curious.
it's an excellent course, but it takes a lot of your personal time. It's all done online. There's no classroom sessions to go to. Usually it's a group of 25 people from across the country. There's a professor at Dal and one at UVic that co-author this program. Gordon McIntosh is the guy at University of Victoria. Very well known in the FCM group. And Novak.
Jack Novak.
Jack
Oh,
Novak.
Jack Novak.
At Dalhousie is the other end of it here. It's an excellent program. It's not cheap, but and it does take a lot of your time. But certainly, if anyone is considering putting the sign out in October, this would definitely be to their advantage. When does this one start? Yeah. So it'll be done by then.
And you and I weren't in the same course, but we have both taken this course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would agree, it actually was very useful.
Yeah.
And reasonably challenging. So yeah, beware if you
Yeah.
decide to take it. There is some time commitment.
Just the sheer volume.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know you'll find that there's people from a lot of municipalities across Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and Ontario and you know right across the country, but a lot of people from Nova Scotia that take the course.
And it's an exam,
Pardon me?
there's an exam.
No, there's not an exam per se. It's mostly done with papers, and the final one is pretty substantial, I guess. But it's not something that you end up scratching your head over because you're going through these pieces. You're having the discussions, and if you're doing the readings each week, yeah,
Something to think about.
something to consider. Yes, we do. All in favor?
Oh, yeah.
Motion's carried. We are received and we are filed. Okay, let's go to. We did that one. Staff reports.
Well, as usual, I'll take questions. This is probably the most
A lot of stars.
substantial
A lot of
update because
stars
it's been
now.
a long time with the Christmas break since we fully updated this. No star on that top one, but I do have an update as promised, which we'll discuss in closed session.
Later on.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions?
Comprehensive.
Oh, good.
Oh, that looked good.
Okay. You're getting off easy tonight, CAO. Must have been doing something right. Okay.
Oh,
Sorry.
yes, I'm sorry. I did have a question about the operating initiatives, the website, operating initiatives number 6. Website, what's the process for developing the website and rolling it out? Just briefly,
Yeah, so to begin with, we did some surveying of council committees, council members, and staff to get some initial feedback about features that might be incorporated into the website, things that people liked about the current, didn't like about the current. We've taken all that stuff in. We've had initial meeting with Skysdale, it was in their contract to do the website, laying out, some of the, high-level design philosophy and some of the features and things that we are hoping to see. That is to help them create a draft, which we'll review, and when it is at a sufficient point, a sufficient draft level that it's appropriate to do so, we'll arrange a demonstration for council, and that will be in an offline environment. And then any subsequent changes, and then we can get it approved to put it up on the live web. It is hoped to be completed by the end of March. Like many things, we'll see where we end up. If there's a lot of revisions and back and forth, it may be delayed. But I expect that by that time we will have our demo anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We'll keep you updated.
A beta version.
Yeah, essentially.
And in the discussions with SkySail, are accessibility issues being part of that discussion?
Yeah, we've obtained some accessibility guidelines and forwarded that to them. So that's going to be part of the and text to speech and some of those other considerations that we're looking at.
There was a reference in the minutes from the accessibility committee that we didn't manage to get to, referencing some expert in the.
Yeah, she's the one who presented at the field house last year, which I attended.
Okay.
And
alright,
we
so
do
you're
have
all on
her
top of that.
notes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about that accessibility meeting that you guys weren't at in terms of the lighting in our room here.
Mhm,
You know, we might get a little criticism. It is pretty harsh.
Yeah.
On a recurring theme about the bandstand roof, are you feeling comfortable that the decision that you've made is going to have enough? Are we moving along with that?
I mean, I'm
Right.
still in this place where I asked Eric about it last week, and he
Okay.
said, "Well, we've got some really nice weather coming this next week, so
Okay.
they say they're going to get down there."
But
Well, I don't know. It's weather dependent,
Yeah.
but I'm surprised whether we're going to see them.
has
or not
anyone
see them.
seen the material? Like, has anyone seen this is metal, right? We're doing
Yeah,
metal.
this is the metal shingle.
Individual
option.
shingle
Yeah, individual
option.
shingle option.
This is-
We've seen it on other homes, and
Yeah.
we've seen the photos and stuff. But
Is that what they got in Mahone Bay Center?
This
no,
is what
there
you
is
have
a
on your-
home in town that Derek gives an example. I'm forgetting.
Was there?
My daughter's.
She has
Your
one,
daughter
yeah.
My
she
daughter
has.
has one similar to that.
Yeah, it's quite attractive, actually.
So at this point now, it's really just like when they say waiting on weather.
No,
we're
fair enough.
waiting till
Okay.
April. You know, we are supposed to get it on this fiscal, but it'll depend on the weather.
Do the right one. Let's do the right job on that.
Councillor O'Neill?
Just a quick check on the finance manager's report under the heading, it's item number 2, the tax bills, tax sale. Is that updated with the latest information, or has there, number 2?
Yeah, latest. 'cause
Yeah.
I don't-
That is the latest information on that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we're close to the decision as to whether we do have a tax sale or not, based on this one property.
Thank you.
There you go, Mr. Mayor. We did have some questions. I don't know if there's
Okay,
any others. or-
everybody's
good.
happy now? Okay, love to hear it. Let's go to the civic addressing bylaw.
All right. So this came up in the report from the deputy fire chief.
Yeah?
Was the rationale for this. Maureen did some work on it. We have a recommendation, which is to give first reading to this draft, but if there are any questions prior to that, please jump in.
The only comment I would make is that going over it was very comprehensive. There was a lot of things covered off that I probably wouldn't have thought of. Like, you know, when you talk about your distance from the road, and then in Mahone Bay we have so many things that are almost sitting on the sidewalk and use of buildings. So I thought it was really quite a good approach to solving that problem that we have.
Okay. Councillor
Yeah,
Carver?
I agreed. It was so comprehensive. It was really amazing. I did have a question about one of the references to the signs, the numbers being 48 inches above grade. So does that? I was trying to visualize my own number, and I don't think it does. The grade mean the grade of the road, the surface of the road, or does it mean actually
Your
the surface
property.
The property rate.
where the post is actually in? So the number should be 4 feet off the ground. In other words, all right, all right. And then I had another in 6.2 somewhere in the bylaw. The word visual is used when I think it should be the word visible.
Do you know which number?
6.2 J.
That's a phenomenal skill, Penny.
And shall
Honestly, you should be moonlighting at Stuart McKelvey as well.
Yeah, and you're right. It's just a typo. Good catch.
Mayor, hearing that, with that edit, I would move the council approve the first reading of the Town of Mahone Bay Civic Addressing Bylaw.
I'll second that.
Councillor Bain? Moved and seconded? All in favor? Oh,
Is
I was
everyone
jumping
I always
around.
wait for Councillor Carter to go, well, I did one thing.
No, it's,
While we're here, if you want to put in your calendars, if everyone's supportive, we're proposing the public hearing as per standard practice in front of the council meeting on the 27th, because that will give us enough time to advertise.
27th of February.
So it'd be 6:30 on the 27th of
That's the council.
February.
It's not a pin, it's a hearing.
It's a hearing, yeah. Well, we didn't, I don't expect we'll get a lot of feedback on this one.
no.
Okay,
And then once it is approved, if it is approved, obviously education is the main purpose of this, so I'm sure Maureen will look for opportunities.
Well, it's great to have that clarified now, codified.
metal sticks to put your number on?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's Lunenburg Hardware.
Or Lighthouse, the newspaper. I got mine from the newspaper.
Did you?
Lighthouse Now.
Okay, I've been to Canadian Tire, been to Gauss Hardware.
Lunenburg
Lunenburg
Hardware.
Hardware, okay.
When we first started doing this, Arthur Ham made most of those.
Yeah.
He made the first one, but Al's got it.
Okay, next item on the agenda is climate mitigation.
This report is for information, and we have a couple of kind of small recommendations as well, but this is a lot of information in that it's been since September, before we even received our low carbon communities funding, since our last update, and Catherine's hard at work, and we wanted to show council some of the things
Yeah.
that she's working on.
Lots of
Hoping to
go.
come to some conclusions in time for budget. So there's
Questions?
specific recommendations as well.
Mayor, hearing the, we had the delegation from the Neothermo team last council meetings. I would make a motion that council direct staff to issue a letter of support to Neothermal to advance their SDTC application.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard any notion of cost associated with that product that they were demonstrating, the big salt-filled heat storage pieces?
Well, I can speak to their intended commercial costs. They're intending to get the cost down to $10,000 per unit.
For a
Yeah.
home-sized
And I
application.
believe they stand, and Joe would probably remember, 40,000 at this time?
I mean,
is what they're
yeah,
doing?
they're at the front end of the cost curve, as
So
they
yeah,
say.
they have a ways
Okay.
to come down.
Yeah.
At $10,000, they think it would be like marketable.
Possible.
Okay. I couldn't recall hearing a number when they were, all right?
That's all.
Could I make a comment? Would it help in the motion to spell out SDTC, what it stands for?
I think that's a good.
Yeah,
idea.
we can certainly do that. We can certainly do that. I'm
Okay.
forgetting now. I'll have to go up and look at where it first appeared to.
So do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Motion's carried.
So we have a second recommendation here, and I know this one is fairly new to the council, but what we're getting the impression that there is a fair bit of support out there, an interest from the private sector in a program of this nature. Request for expression of interest is just that. It's not a commitment. But prior to developing any budget recommendations, we feel it's necessary to create an even playing field for those potentially interested parties. So that's the intention here.
I'll make that motion.
That's around the car share program?
Yeah.
So I'll make that motion, that council direct staff to issue a request for expression of interest in potential Mahone Bay electric vehicle car share program.
Second the motion.
Okay. The car share would be, the cars would be here and I can car share and go.
Yeah, that's essentially
Wherever,
the
or-
concept. Is we're about to install an 8-network charging,
Yeah.
an 8-location charging network in town, and thought would be that with some vehicles that could be potentially obtained via a partnership with a private entity, those vehicles would be here available for use by residents, and there would be a car share application that residents would have access to manage the bookings of those vehicles. So if you wanted to, if you have one car in the household and it's out, it's away, or you have a need to use an additional vehicle, as a resident, you would have at a nominal fee, a reasonable fee, an opportunity to take that vehicle out for trips within the county. It's intended to help exposure and knowledge really more than anything, but also it's good revenue for our electric utility where that's charging is coming from, and it would potentially fill a bit of a gap in terms of the ability of people to choose not to own or reduce the number of private automobiles they own at a household level. And we're still testing the interest, obviously, through the focus groups that have just taken place, through the survey that Catherine is operating. We'd like to have a bit more data. And while we're doing that, we want to be able to go out and connect with some potential partners. So if it all lines up, we'll be coming back with a proposal. And hopefully this would be something that Department of Energy and or FCM are quite interested in, and there's been a lot of interest from Department of Energy, so they get some funding.
I have a question about your scope for the request for expression of interest. Would you be looking to hear from partners who are already established car share programs, for example, as an example, the one in Halifax, or are you looking or are you looking for expression of interest from a fleet of vehicles owned by the town?
I think essentially both. I mean, we're really trying to cast a wide net. There is a value in the operation of like the administration of and the booking system and the software that's used in that. So we know Atlantic Car Share, parent company Communauto out of Quebec, has developed unique software and administrative packages for car share programs. Not, to my knowledge, electric vehicle car share programs. And we also know that there are companies that might be interested to supply electric vehicles. And so whether those two different parties need to become connected through us, or whether they potentially have worked to develop their own connections to be able to offer both levels of support. There's only one electric vehicle car share program in the world, to my knowledge, which is in the city of Berlin. That's a Volkswagen program. So this would be fairly unique, but I've been quite impressed by the level of interest in the private sector. So it'll be interesting to see what we get.
See what we get back.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll be discussing things like, the economy of scale for the particular area, how many people do you have to have? Maybe there's something we can co-opt with Lunenburg and Bridgewater. If there's not enough people here to do it, but if we decided to send a contingent to Berlin to have a look at it.
That's right.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion's carried. Good one. Communications plan.
This is another one for information. It's been a
Sale?
little while in coming. Yeah. So before Christmas, we had a report from SkySail concerning the intent to develop communications strategy and style guide based on the approval of certain style elements in the logo. And I've attached the documents that they've developed to date. The communications plan has been a working document. You'll note there are sections where they say this is dependent on approvals the next year, or this is we know we're developing materials that have not yet been developed that will be added, but it does give a sense, and especially with regard to the changes since September, of where we're expecting the service to go over the term of the contract. And it's a great opportunity to get feedback or questions from council, if there are any, to make sure that we keep aligned with the work that they're doing. So
The two questions I have, Dylan, on this. One was when are we going to roll out the new logo, and what's the cadence for when we're going to start seeing that image? I mean, even the report itself is using the old image. So I bet, like, at some date, I'm sure we'll have to go live with that. And the second piece is, I know that the original program funding for the communications budget was created when we thought we were doing capital projects that we're not doing now. Do you think you'll be able to come back to council with sort of reallocation of, and I'm assuming there'll be a lot higher allocation to the fire hall for all the obvious reasons. A, it's a project going forward, it's big, it can take a bigger allocation. But could you endeavor to come back sometime before the end of the quarter, before the year, and just to refresh council's memory about how we're splitting up the 60 grand, like how much is expense and how much is capital going to each project?
Yeah, I will do that, and also
Yeah.
the fact that some of it is this fiscal, and
Right.
some of it's next fiscal.
Right.
So I'll take this fiscal part and show you how we've spent it, and then we'll look at
Right.
what we're expecting in the next fiscal.
Just so we could, I think the original approval, if you go back to council's original approval of that budget, it was
Not getting the ICIP funding
Right.
took $17,000. I think.
I just
out
think
of
we
it, yeah.
we just need to clean that approval up so that we understand where the money's coming from. Okay, thanks.
Oh, to answer your first question, though, answer the second question. Answer the first question. So we have been developing templates. SkySo's been developing templates. So that's everything from minutes, staff reports, strategic plan documents, things like that, to incorporate the new logo and style guide. So we are at the point, and Mo has been working a lot on this stuff to make sure that the administrative team has that and is able to use it and it's integrated into the software that we use. So our intention is, from this point, we will, as of the next council meeting, prepare the package with the new, in line with the new style guide and logo. The website will, as I said, be a couple more months getting finished, but it's being designed on that style guide and logo now.
Just one thing to add to that is that our social media and website, I believe, will be getting a quick refresh. We've been saying,
Okay, so the full thing's coming, but the quick refresh next week?
yes, yeah, that seriously, first of the week, we should start seeing some things. I'm currently typing up what the business cards, what the names are and email addresses are, so it will come out very, very soon.
And who are you?
Are you
Well, I messed a couple of them up, so that's still it.
Are you looking for a motion to accept this as information?
Yeah, we usually get some motion on reports, so where it's just for information.
Well, I would move that council accept this report for information.
Second motion.
I have a
Councillor
I have a
Fairburn?
comment and a question before we go to the vote. Question is, will there be some outreach to the community, to the public, to let them know about this change through the mayor's newsletter or whatever? And my comment is, when I went through the materials, going through the materials, one of the thoughts that came to me was how useful they are in terms of public education. And we've already talked about that, and whether we can use them in a targeted way with the school, with Bayview, somehow. I'm just throwing the idea out. It could be in municipal week somehow. Because they're sort of appealing, they're attractive and appealing. It could be a way to engage youth in talking about what's under the road.
It would be interesting to try to do like a one-page municipal awareness treatment using the kind of, what they've done with asset management.
Or take kids on on a tour of the water plant.
Well, that's
yeah,
always
yeah.
something that we're
All
looking
those
to be
things.
able to put together. But I do think there's a point there around these forays into making information accessible that is
yeah.
not usually accessible to the public.
Well, so the key thing there for me was, that I think I see them as being useful for engaging young people as well as, the voters. In terms, so.
Yeah. No, and around the GHGs, Maureen has previously mentioned, I think, that we've tried to connect with the social studies program at the school. And I think it would be quite interesting if we do get a little bit of a project together with them to put some amount of Sky Sail's resource at the disposal
Yeah, I
of
think
that.
that'd be interesting.
The greenhouse gas part of Sky Sail's budget, to Joe's point about the reallocation of things, because we did get the low carbon communities funding. If anything, that has a little bit of extra room in it, so that's a good area to focus on.
Mm. Okay, any other questions on the motion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Alrighty. Let's go to NSFM. This is a council item number 7. NSFM Spring and Fall Conference topics. Councillor Carver.
Thank you.
And you
So,
want me to put your email? You had.
I have it.
Oh,
Well, I
you've
have
got
it.
Okay.
that's okay. So when I saw the request from NSFM to submit topics, I began thinking of things that were interesting to me, and then wondered about the relative merits of submitting ideas as an individual or submitting them as a council. My hunch was, and I may be wrong, is that submitting them as a council has a little more weight. I just put down things that were on my mind. One is around the recycled materials and the disappearing markets for them. And I was really struck in the
MJSP.
thank you, minutes about all this stuff that's just sitting
Cardboard,
around now, not
plastic.
going anywhere.
Yeah.
It was shocking to me to see that. I mean, if it's happening here, I mean, is it worth putting on an agenda as some kind of item?
Well, just as an aside, I had a discussion today when I was in Halifax with Pam Mood, who is the president of the NSFM, and we got talking about the letter. I think I sent you all a copy of the letter that came in to MJSB from Juanita Spencer.
Yeah.
I think we sent it out. Yes, we did. And she, Pam Mood, has expressed the suggestion or asked, bouncing the idea around if it's a topic we could maybe talk about at the spring conference and then come up with a recommendation that would go to the fall conference. And I suggested to her from the discussion we had at MJSB this is not a South Shore problem. It's not a Region 6 problem.
No.
It's everywhere in the province. There is one contract holder that is gradually becoming in control of the entire waste management business. There's no market for the products, and contrary to what was said tonight, the Sustain plant in Chester is having
that's
some
right.
really
Yeah.
severe problems
That's right.
dealing with the volume that we're generating.
Yep.
Although when I spoke with the chap on Sunday at the session at the center, the guy that owns those 4 businesses that you saw going around tonight, he is of the opinion it's just growing pains. Everything is kind of falling into place. Councillor Bain?
Well, I had brought up at the one session I don't know if there's enough volume for biofuel.
Right.
But there might be a market there. I mean, there's gotta be a cost in storage.
Yeah.
Trucking, they'll know the cost of trucking. I think it's probably worth looking into. I mean, very simple question, there may be a very simple answer, which could be, for some reason environmentally it's not good, but it is full of glue, and so is wet wood, it's what they burn.
I
Which is
signed off
totally inefficient.
checks from MJSB this morning for the month of January. It's over $100,000 we paid to Kaiser Meadows to take plastics and compost.
I just think it's worth asking the question, there might be a very simple answer, I don't know.
So is that to say that it might be worthwhile putting that forward to
Well,
NSFM?
I think there's a plan afoot to do that, but it wouldn't hurt
For us to say that,
to
yeah, okay.
reinforce.
I have asked Councillor Feeney at the next meeting to take that.
To
Or
MJSB.
whatever it is,
Or
and just
Area
pose
6.
the question, and maybe it'll plant the seed, there might be a logical answer why they couldn't do it. On the other hand, they may say, let's try it.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the topics that were on my mind as a possible,
Can I just comment
oh,
on
yes,
the
so sorry.
solid waste one? Just to note that the province has a number of innovation programs for investment in creative ways to process certain types of waste products. And they explicitly include from those programs processing standard plastics, which is to say that they have traditionally taken for granted that a market did exist, and we're not willing to invest in the creation of a market within Nova Scotia. And clearly a market does not exist. So at the very least, and the Shelburne Town Council wrote them about this, I think 5 or 6 years ago, they should allow those programs to be accessed by a local entrepreneur looking to come up with a disposal for traditional plastic materials. It shouldn't be restricted to exotic materials because we're not successfully marketing the traditional plastic. So that's just a suggestion in terms of like there is funding now, and it's just not being available to an entrepreneur who wants to rework plastics 1 through 3 or whatever the basic plastics.
So is it something that we want to suggest goes on an agenda at a conference? I'm just talking about. The next one was the short-term accommodations. What are the issues? What are the concerns? What possible responses are there? What are people doing around the province? Is that a suitable topic for NSFN? Next one was open pen fish farming. I mean, it's such an enormous topic for us and for many other communities around the province. Is the NSFN conference workshop format a suitable place for it? And I also, because senior safety is always on my mind, the programs there and the issue about municipal responsibility versus provincial responsibility for ensuring that these programs are strong across the province. So my question is there any merit in putting items forward as a council versus just as individual submissions?
I thought that was a fine list. What struck me about your list was the conversation we were having before the last conference about the 54 priorities, of which we were trying to narrow down to the top 8. And yet, for many of the priorities that kind of, I think, hit us most closely to home, they were number 43, physician recruitment number 49, and so some of the top 5 are the same top 5 that were there in 1997, 98, 99, like they never change. And to Councillor Carver's point, it might be time to kind of shuffle up the deck a little to give some of these lower priority items a little more exposure. I thought that like all of the items that were mentioned in your email, I think absolutely should be discussed and taken on but they're probably not in the top 5 when we get through that process with all the 53 municipalities trying to whittle it down to what are the 4 things we're going to talk about. We all know what they're going to be. It's like, let's talk about the cap.
Roads.
Let's talk about roads. Like, let's talk about, So I think that if there was a way that we could dovetail the initiative, I think if we were going to write a letter to say we should have some process to evaluate the things that everyone thinks that are important, but they might not be the top 3 things, because we talk about the top 3 things ad nauseum, right, all the time. So anyway, I think that's a good place to start, though, Penny.
Well, where are we
What's the due date for that, Penny? Do you-
February. I don't have the letter in front of me.
I think it was the 4th.
Yeah, it's soon. This was the last meeting before the due date. Yeah. Yes, I think it's the 3rd or 4th. Maybe the 3rd.
So if council is inclined to, as a group, submit anything, then a resolution would be in order at this meeting. Otherwise, we understand individual councillors can submit.
I think there's a lot of merit to having council submit a list of priority items.
3 are allowed.
3 priority items. I also think there's a benefit to having 3 priority items that are really Mahone Bay centric. Give small town. We don't need to talk about provincial highways. Let's just give a few things that are kind of unique to our experience.
So these are workshop suggestions. They're not the resolutions.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to make this motion then. Can I make this motion?
Go for
I'll make a motion that we do, as a council, submit a list of 3 items for potential workshops at either the spring or fall conference, and I would suggest that they be the top 3 on my list. The top 3 on the list.
Okay.
That's my motion.
Okay. Do we have a seconder?
Second the motion, your worship.
What's the top three on your list, please?
Disappearing markets for recycled materials, short-term accommodations, issues, concerns, and responses, open pen fish farming.
Gonna be a long conference. Okay, as we've heard the motion, it's been moved, it's been seconded by the deputy mayor. All in favor? Motion's carried.
And I'll send in the suggested by the senior safety on my own. Yeah.
Okay, and of course, we all realize and appreciate when you look at NSFM's resolutions, CAP,
Yeah.
EPR,
Yeah, exactly.
roads, municipal funding, and municipal modernization.
Right.
You know, that's, you get a,
A lot of that stuff could be done, your worship, in a hurry if the province would do something.
well,
Yeah.
Many of those have had
Maybe you're-
recommendations developed long ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
okay,
APR is like,
How old is that one?
let's go to committee reports.
a lot under committee reports.
A lot under committee reports, the CAO says. The Asset Management Committee, we met last Thursday. We had 3 no-shows, which was rather unfortunate.
We've noted that we're going to have to talk with Danielle King.
Yes,
Concerning
Ms. King's participation or attendance at a number of different committee events is causing some concern.
Comment again on that about the difference between being absent and being listed as regrets. If you've sent regrets, it should be noted. If you're absent without regrets, you're absent.
I think you're still, whether you're absent with or without regrets is a question of courtesy, but from the aspect of participation in the work of the committee, it can't get done if you're not there.
I understand that, but
I'm
it's
just-
a different topic.
The
it's a
alternative
red
in terms
herring.
of minute taking would be to change regrets to absent, and then in brackets after a name, put with regret.
Yeah.
And in this case, we would we would not put with regret after that one on the. But yeah, unless council overall wants to direct that we do so, we're not in the habit of doing that.
Any questions on the asset committee report?
There's no recommendations.
No, there isn't, I'm quite sure. No, there wasn't. I think the committee is still new and fresh enough to stay
But it
away
looks
from.
like- But it looks like a lot's happening.
Mayor, just one point on 8.2, the audit committee for are we sure that Mr. Vino's name is spelled correctly?
it was just OT, wasn't it?
I couldn't recall. We had it incorrectly spelled
Either
last
said
meeting.
add a TE or drop
Yeah.
it. I think he said drop
I
a
think-
TE.
Okay.
Drop the TE.
Yeah.
The first
Right. I
time I
think
got
the
the
sixth
previous
letter
committee
version
members
is the
on, I
one.
get the names completely wrong. Then I spelled it.
VEINOT.
It's correct.
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe it is.
Yeah, that's right.
It
Other
only
than,
took me 3 meetings to get it right.
okay, I didn't want to do that one more time.
This is when Mo's not there.
Other than that, I think we're in good shape on that.
Okay.
We'll double check it against his application.
Okay, just I know we talked about
Yeah, we don't want to get it wrong again.
that.
Social Library Board,
Reputation.
Lunenburg County Senior Safeties Program, anything?
Well, I had a question about, we
Oh,
skipped
the
up-
other one did have a motion. Oh, but it's a motion to February 11th. I should just note that we will put the audit agenda or minutes back on the report on February 11th, just so that someone can at that time make a motion concerning the investment policy and the credit card use policy. Both of them in here are not highlighted because they're actually recommendations to February 11th. So Maureen, we'll put this back on for that purpose on the 11th. Just because they're policies, they couldn't be approved at this meeting because they hadn't been circulated.
Councillor Carver.
I had a question about the library board and why it is that Queens and Modal and Modic and Town of Bridgewater all have councillors on that board, and we have a citizen representative. Why the difference? I'm curious.
They couldn't find a citizen in those other places to do it.
we were fortunate to have an accomplished published
Yeah.
author. We figured that we were better off with them.
Yeah,
Is that really the reason? They could, really?
there was no requirement that it had to be a member of council,
Okay,
right? And
Yeah.
the author
That's
can
fine.
read, you know.
okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. There's no motions in the senior safety program.
No, there's no motions, but I do want to say that we got information today that we've just received a rather substantial, a nice grant
Oh, good.
from the Law Foundation of Nova Scotia, and it's going to enable us to hire another half-time person
Wow,
for
Ooh.
the next year. So we're feeling kind of,
that's great.
Was that an application based grant?
Jeez.
Yeah,
Yes.
good catch
Yep.
to even find it from that organization.
yes, it was,
Who was the detective that found it?
well, it was a team effort.
Excellent.
She
Yeah.
blushes
Well,
when she
congratulations, that's good news.
Yes,
Okay. Well, congratulations. I think
Thank
that
you.
maybe that could be a note for the, for what? For the mayor's newsletter somewhere. Congratulations to.
I'll send you some information if you would. That would be actually that would be kind of nice actually.
So the
Any
next
questions
one,
on, go ahead.
we don't have, they came out today, the Remo minutes. They just didn't arrive in time, so
Yeah.
we wanted these things in here because the request from that meeting was that the councils consider these,
Mm.
but we just didn't have the minutes in time, so.
Do we have, so you need to apply to have your facility recognized as an official comfort station. That's what I took away from the Remo note.
Yeah, I
Are
mean,
we-
essentially these, the main purpose of these is to make it easier for us to have a current list
Mm.
that groups would want to collaborate with Remo on, which has not always been the case, and provide guidance to the operators of comfort centers. But at the end of the day, they are autonomous, and it's quite clear that the circumstances in which Remo would be willing to reimburse expenditures or anything.
And I think it's not an application to them, I think you just have to notify them that you would like to be, they're gonna
Yeah.
open up, they're gonna be a comfort center.
Yeah,
Oh, I thought
the
they
They're gonna establish one.
The shelter application requires approval,
Approval, okay.
shelter
but the
one,
comfort
not-
center doesn't. Yeah, I think.
I think you're right.
I think the minutes of that really accurately reflects the discussion we had at that meeting. And I think they're really worth reading because to make sure you understand a comfort center and a shelter, and that's covered off very well.
And who activates it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what the expectation will be. I think
that is-
we had talked about the fact that there would not be, unless you get to the point where the Red Cross gets involved, there is not going to be any assistance for providing the service. And recently, in the last big storm that we had, there were organizations, fire halls and whatnot, that opened their doors and said, come in, and then they went looking for money from the Remo group to offset their expenses, and it's just not gonna happen.
I think that's very true, and I think that's why everybody should read that and get a full
Yeah.
understanding of what it is, because Red Cross comes up with the blankets and all this kind of stuff.
That's right.
And municipalities do not have that resource and probably
Red
should.
Cross looks after the shelter centers.
Yeah.
It's what, Richard?
Red Cross looks after the shelters.
Yes, yeah.
I thought it was I thought it was excellent
Yeah,
that
no,
those
it's well
documents, the clarity finally, because for you every year, sort of what, who's in charge of it? So it's great. The clarity is great.
And I think this is starting to show having a full-time
Angela
coordinator
Henhoff, I was just
Yeah.
gonna
has
say.
the time to do this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. She seems to be the driving key
Yeah.
to the new life that's been breathed into the Remos process.
So I'm seeing there that Remo still has to go out and certify you as a comfort station. And I'm just gonna say you can open up whenever you please.
Okay.
That's
Did
going to
we
be
not
something
have
that's
a
going to need
Remo
more
budget
public
in-
education too.
So I think that are they? I don't. Maybe I'll have to look at the minutes. I was just reading them out. Are they looking for us to actually pass a motion on these, or is it just up to our representative to the Remo board to express that the council reviewed them and was supportive? Not totally familiar with the. I think this might be the first Remo document that's been sent to the councils for review since I've been here.
Yeah.
Anyone have a sense of that?
I believe it was expressed in the budget conversation there. Our share is pretty reasonable, But that I think our mayor, who is also chair,
Yeah.
emphasized that it would have to come back to the various councils. And I don't know if there was a motion to that
Yeah,
effect, but I think it was
I
a
think it
consensus
was.
for sure. I guess it was a motion.
It's not enough for us to sit around the remote team
That's right.
and say, hey, let's do it.
We can't,
We're agreeing in principle until it comes back here.
exactly.
And it does say in the motion now that, thank you, Con, I got it in the minutes.
It is.
As presented and recommended to partner councils for approval. So there would need to be a motion on these one or two motions to say that the Mahone Bay Council has approved these documents so that the Remo board can actually use them.
Somebody want
Are you looking for a motion?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's what
I'll
I would
make the motion.
moved, seconded?
And the motion is to simply use these documents.
To
Support these
that,
documents.
and I say the motion would be that the Mahone Bay Town Council expresses its approval of the draft comfort centers and emergency shelters procedures.
So we're accepting the
Right.
definitions
Okay,
as
Yeah.
provided. Okay.
And
All in
the
favor?
board needs that from all the units before they start using it.
Does it also, is there not also a motion around budget?
Oh, was that? That was.
I thought that was included in the discussion.
Yeah, but we didn't get any additional information. Budget is being recommended there, but
Yeah.
to be able to present it somehow.
Be nice to
Wasn't
have
in
the
your
Mahone Bay
package.
number. I know it's a reasonable number. I can't remember exactly what it was.
It wasn't significantly.
But the remote coordinator is now a full-time position. And there's been an increase in the cost because of that. But, I mean, our share of the cost is minimal,
Whatever it
Yeah.
is.
next to nothing, so. Not nothing.
Class.
Again,
Yeah.
it was agreed that we would bring it back to councils, but we may not have gotten that paperwork from them.
Well, and you know what, the draft minutes just came out, so we can put the draft minutes are coming to the next meeting. We can put the budget documents in your package at the next meeting and still beat the next Remo meeting.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
that would make people
Let's
more
do that.
comfortable
Yes.
than trying to.
February
put it out
11th,
now,
we'll
but-
defer the budget issue on Remo?
Yeah.
Okay. Then let's go to the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Councillor Feeney and Councillor Carver?
I think this was the meeting that was also at the same time as our last council meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
No, Councillor.
No, this is the,
Yeah, there was a little confusion on when it was, and then when they did nail it down, turned out to be a night where we didn't have any conflicts as a group. But I think that individually, I know that Penny expressed the conflict, and I didn't
no, this is
attend.
on
No,
the
I-
20th.
I
Yeah.
injured myself that
Oh.
day.
Dylan, why don't you provide a quick overview, if you don't mind?
So it was a good first meeting. You know, the main thing at this point is that Sarah with MODL has been appointed accessibility coordinator. So essentially, she's half time on supporting this committee, and that makes a huge difference. Although there is a staff resource group, and each unit has a member, and we've all been quite significantly, you know, holding up our end, attending the meetings. I will say all the units have been regularly attending those meetings and supporting the committee. So as a group, but mostly with Sarah, we developed a work plan and a budget for the first year, 2020-21, to recommend to the committee members, and also kind of building on the orientation session in the fall, walk through the next steps in the work plan, which are essentially around the consultation part. So the first part of the committee's work is to make sure that the county-wide plan is based on a robust public engagement process that takes in persons with disabilities and the general public. And so because the committee has a great cross-section of different people with different disabilities, different issues, that has been a great opportunity to identify considerations for that process. And moving pretty quickly to get some resources in place. Town of Bridgewater just today or yesterday announced that they were going to put some time from a temporary staff person that they have, who is a person with disability, who specializes in consultation. So they're going to be supporting the committee on this, and pending budget approval and some external funding grants and things,
there's an expectation from Sarah that we'll be able to hire one or even two additional people on a short-term basis, prioritizing, as per the committee's request, applicants with disabilities. So yeah, I think things are going quite well. The budget is a bit strange because Sarah's very confident that with between 3 different funding programs that she's trying to tap into, that this budget will probably disappear and not require significant funding for the municipalities. That being said, we don't know that. If we don't get any of the funding, there is a potential to scale down the budget a little bit. But essentially what they're looking at is about a $30,000 budget for 2021, and it would be divided on a uniform assessment basis was the suggestion.
Mhm.
So, good deal from Mahone Bay as usual. I will always note in that there is a direct cost to the units in the work plan. So essentially the framework for the countywide accessibility plan is being developed between now and July. And then in the fall, time to kind of coincide with municipal elections, the committee's not necessarily going to be as active. The units are to develop operational plans, which essentially means taking these standards for the county and auditing our own infrastructure, making a list and saying, well, we've actually got 8 kilometers of sidewalk and we now need to compare it to the standard, right? So it's not that we have to do all of those comparisons, which probably would be a really excessive amount of work to get on the fall, but we have to identify them. We have to have an operational plan that will take us from where we are today to the application of these new standards. And we may need, and by budget I'll come with a recommendation, we may need external support to do that. Most of the units would be doing that with their own in-house engineering resources and other support staff that we just simply don't have. So while we'll pay the smallest share of the accessibility committee budget, there may be a direct cost for that component of an operational plan. So,
Just one comment about the literature that they sent out, one of the documents. If you look at all the logos, I just like you to look at the Mahone.
I saw the same thing. The
Oh,
orange one?
Yeah.
Yeah, the orange one. I was wondering, well, where is that?
did they make their own?
I don't know. It's,
No, it's actually on the next document.
Don't worry,
It's
I
on-
flipped from
it's on one of the other
It's the
documents.
chamber one.
They use the chamber logo.
Oh, okay.
So
Just
So I don't know if in this one there was do we have any actual recommendations through the councils yet? I feel like that might have been next.
The only thing I saw on there was they were looking for an approval of budget.
budget is in a different document, huh?
It's in the next section of this.
Yeah, because I think in that
but-
document, it says that they're gonna get the CAOs to approve the appropriate,
That's,
which is not quite kosher, but
So
Well,
the
it says
work
here the
plan didn't go to-
CAOs recommend dividing the cost.
which document?
So ours would be
6.2, right?
$800.91 according to this, our cost.
Yeah, and that document, the one that breaks down the cost, was a document that was developed by Sarah for the CIOs to consider. And then we did consider it, and everyone felt that we would go back to our councils on a uniform assessment basis. So that document's a reflection of what the CIOs, felt was appropriate to present to councils. And that's sort of the pass on the budget to relevant CIOs for approval. But at the end of the day, then the CIOs have to bring it to their councils. So because it is attached in here, and as Richard said, we know our contribution for it, if council is willing to do so, there's no reason not to approve our contribution at this time. So if you're willing. And I can't, I gotta open the other document to get the number, but Richard,
$800.91.
you wanna jump in and make it? I don't even need to.
I will make the motion that we approve the Mahone Bay portion of the budget for the Lunenburg County Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee at $800.91. It's just 2% of our assessment.
Second.
question. $55 per meeting? We're paying people to attend this meeting?
So I can elaborate on that because this was a question that was raised at the orientation session, and it actually comes back to a discussion on our council. So this is a decision to follow the MODL expense guidelines. We had a question: whose expense guidelines apply to this committee?
These are the
And,
citizens, right?
Yeah. So MODL's expense guidelines provide for a nominal meeting pay to cover associated expenses such as childcare. It is not a reimbursable amount that you need to bring in a receipt for. It's just a straight $55 meeting pay. It doesn't apply to council members. It does apply to members of the public serving as volunteers. There had been a question at the previous meeting about whose expense policy applies, and also would it afford anything for childcare, as there was one member of the committee who was specifically curious about that. So this does, and this is the MODL standard use. This is how their policy works. And since Sarah's, the hosting this, felt that it made sense to put these expenses through MODL for all those members. It has already been raised by a couple of the members that they intended to return this money, or as a group, they have some intent to possibly discuss donating it to causes that relate to the committee's mandate. So some people were, immediately like, well, we don't have any childcare expenses, we don't need this money. But that is the MODL policy for community members.
Now, we don't have any citizens on this committee.
That's not how the citizen
No.
appointments work. I always try to remind MODL that because they forget that all the time. We don't each have a member, but
Yeah.
there are a number of members equivalent to the
Right.
number of municipal units serving at Lyra.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there just doesn't happen to be one from the town.
My only question would be, if we're gonna pay people $55 to go to this committee, why would you not pay them $55 to go to all the committees?
Well, the
Well, this
MODL
is-
MODL does.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about MODL,
No,
we're
I'm-
supporting it.
This,
So our
so this
council
isn't a
has-
committee of council.
but they do for committees of council.
No,
So-
but this isn't, this particular committee isn't.
It's not a committee of our council.
Of,
No.
of council.
No.
It's
That's
a
why-
joint.
So, but to your question, would we consider something like this? We've already been asked staff to come back with a report on treatment of expenses for committee members, and Luke will have that, I expect, by our next meeting. So that will essentially be a report that outlines what each unit does. So we've contacted the other units. Most do not do anything. I can say that already. Most do not compensate for childcare or family care expenses. But those that do either do a lump sum, like MODL, or have a receipt-based, pay you back system.
I wouldn't characterize this committee as having the same attributes of a standard municipal committee. This is really, I think, a unique, it'll come and the committee will go away. I mean, there's a tenure, and there's a timeline when the committee will unwind, and it's really associated with the provincial government's mandate around accessibility. So I do think that given the breadth of the region and the municipality, and if you looking around the table at the other citizen members, that particular contingent of citizen membership, I think, really brings some kind of unique attributes to the table, and I think that funding probably makes sense for just this particular circumstance. Can't comment about the rest of Modal's overall program, but personally, on this side, I think that this seems appropriate to me.
Yeah, I agree with that, for this.
Well,
Councilor Bain?
well, in this forthcoming report, is all this going to be covered off, the various levels of committees?
You mean the
Sort of-
finance manager's
Well, this
report?
business of compensation.
This is not a committee of council.
No, but
This
I'm
is just a
no.
committee that we
Well,
have a
I'll
few
finish
councils
my
on.
statement. This is not a committee of council. But is that going to be considered in the
Assessment?
anticipated report? Because if it is, I say we just simply wait till we get that report and then we'll discuss it.
With regards to the possibility of the town of Mahone Bay implementing some type of compensation for family care, those options will be in Luke's report.
Yeah, that's why I'm suggesting we wait till we get that report,
Oh,
then
yeah.
we can
But-
discuss it with paper in hand.
And this, just for point of clarification, this particular amount is for the fact that one participates in the meeting, not because you do or do not have family care issues to attend to. All right?
Alright,
So,
so we didn't get a motion for the
No.
$800 yet.
Yeah,
I did.
Okay.
And Joseph.
And second.
we're in the
Yes.
discussion, the question period now. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go with the next one. No, safety, MJSB 87, Safety and Procurement Officer. This is an incremental service from MJSB.
This is another one that beat the minutes here. And as folks familiar with MJSB would know, we probably won't get those minutes for a long time.
Yeah.
So we brought this forward anyway.
Yeah.
And this is Sue's.
This is on the
It's
the safety officer and
Yeah, that's the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another one. Got the numbers to
Yeah.
it.
Okay. That's the one.
Yeah.
There you go.
yeah, there you go.
Just put those together in Adobe. Okay.
That goes into some detail around what the positions will do and the kinds of services they will provide. And the bottom line is $109,000 for the procurement job and $54,000 for the safety job.
Mhm.
Both,
All in.
trained, qualified, accessible skills profile that each would have to have.
Well,
Councillor
My
Carver.
question about the proposed operating budget, where it has fees, town of Bridgewater and fees modal, both with very similar amounts. And there's town of Mahone Bay with its little tiny amount. So I was puzzled why those two other units were so big, when typically town of Bridgewater contributes far less than modal. I've probably missed something, really.
No, but if you look just to the right of the safety, it's the estimate is for budget purposes only. At the end of the day, the actual
Oh, that's,
charge to each of those two in particular will be based on actual hours.
so that's
used.
anticipating that they will have.
Yeah,
higher
it's
charge.
yeah.
Okay.
the driver's more correlated to capital investment than population.
Yeah, and what
Yeah.
we looked at, the number of and scale of tenders that we're publishing as units.
Yeah.
With safety, the scale of the workforce and
Mhm.
scale of the operation. So these estimates were kind of, based on an idea of how much Bridgewater would use the service, how much MODL would use the service, and how much we would use the service.
We will get a big return on that
On the
on that
investment.
money. It's gonna be. I mean, how big's our program on capital items next year? Several $100,000. I mean, we're gonna save percentages off the capital program with having that centralized, go-to expert. It's gonna be trying to recover as many, deals and synergies we can get with the other municipal units.
And if we do get into joint procurement, I think we
That's-
also stand to probably gain the most out of that,
That's-
because our scale is
Yeah.
the smallest.
It's gonna be. This is absolutely the right way to go.
And the safety, while it's harder to quantify, $2,000 estimated. I mean, we definitely need improvement.
Yeah.
So
$2,000 for a safety program is a
Real one.
real deal. Yeah.
And I mean, it'll look like an expense, but it'll really just save us money.
So unlike in Remo, where we were being asked to approve our share of a specific budget proposal, or the accessibility committee, we were being asked to approve just that $800. In this case, it's not the amount so much as participation, approval of MJSB to go
Take
out
it
and
on.
actually take on these positions
Yeah.
that they're looking for. And I don't have the minutes, but I believe they're looking for that from us now or at our next meeting.
I think that's a soon as we can
Yeah.
type of thing.
Well, I'm prepared to make the motion
Okay.
to support the expansion of the MGA SB's mandate to include those two functions to the town of Mahone Bay.
We have a seconder.
Second.
Seconded by the deputy mayor.
I have a question, if I may, just about the occupational health and safety committees and the role of the workplace safety officer. And this all refers to the stuff around you that you're working with. Is there any mental health component to occupational health and safety committee work? This doesn't affect the vote, but I'm just interested in general whether.
Yeah.
I don't recall that we
Good question.
discussed that.
They're
don't
usually
see that
approached
on
as
the- No, I don't-
healthcare. It's not usually
I don't-
approached as OHS.
And Josh committee.
I don't think so.
Well, just throwing it out there as a, something to, a seed to carry forward. I'm willing to support the vote.
Maybe we can make that observation to NJSB when we respond with this vote, that a concern has been expressed around the notion of the mental health of the workforce, and that one would hope that the Josh or the safety person,
Or the HR person.
yeah, I would see it more in HR than in safety,
Yeah.
but, yeah. Okay,
Well, it's
Because
occupational
the safety
health and
person's not going to
safety,
assess
so-
their mental,
it's what, Richard?
the safety person's not going to assess the person's
Well,
mental.
that's
No.
the only
That's
concern.
I think that's an expertise that is not anticipated in
Not
this-
safety also.
in this.
Well,
That's quite a specialized
I
field.
think one could possibly recognize a mental health issue and ensure the person got referred to the right specialist. But
I think it's more of an ensuring we all
than
have
it is
policies and
safety
procedures in
also.
place with regards to mental health in the workforce, and whether that falls under OHS from an accident prevention perspective, which very well might. So I'll check.
on the
you.
question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Good one. Okay. And we're losing our COO. The end of July. Sue Secord is
Oh, is she
finishing.
really, really leaving it? She
Yeah,
really
end
is
of July.
different.
No, I don't know about that.
I-
She's retiring.
Well,
You're just gonna
She might be sticking
recycle her.
around at more, at
there
a
is
higher
some,
rate.
there are some efforts being expressed at having her stick around for a bit.
I heard a rumor that she might not actually leave.
Councillor O'Neill, new business.
Oh, yes. Mayor, this Sunday, the 26th, I and quite a number of people at the table attended a very well-attended meeting at the Mahone Bay Center to do with it was an information gathering session or public information session regarding the open pen salmon farms. And given that, crowds, it was a very crowded room. I think that's a fact that can't be denied. There are crowd estimates of between 200 and 300 people who either attended or tried to attend that session. So I think it is fair to say that residents are concerned, and they feel that this is a topic that will affect them directly. And I think it's also clear to say, or fair to say, that residents are looking to our council for information and for leadership on this topic. So in giving that some thought and where this council may wish to place itself, it seems reasonable to me that we would want to consider supporting efforts to get additional information on this topic, specifically with respect to how this could reasonably be expected to affect us directly, and to support efforts to get information regarding some assurances being made with regards to jobs and coastal and ocean protections, as well as the industry safeguards. So I wanted to discuss the idea that this council may wish to put together a working group or a subcommittee that would focus on this issue to identify what are those areas that we may seek additional information, and to formalize that as our way of supporting efforts such as demonstrated by, for example, the group from the Twin Bays group from this evening. And I wanted to put it to this council, who I feel has a fairly high level of awareness of the the concern that residents in this town have, to see if they felt that this would be an approach that they would like to take, and if so, I would be prepared to put a notice of motion on the table to that effect.
That motion being
That-
addressed to council at the February 11th meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I would like some guidance on what the protocol might be in terms of formulating a motion and also what a subgroup or a working group might look like to formalize these concerns.
Mayor, on that point, I think that's an appropriate kind of way forward. I think that if you look at some of the other municipalities who are also being impacted by this initiative, their councils have already kind of gone on the record with support or lack thereof, depending on. And I'm not aware of any municipal support, blanket support for the investment, but there are a number of municipalities have already gone on the record with recorded votes opposing the open pen process. So I think we probably need to get there one way or the other in a reasonable amount of time. I was interested to see the Minister of Fisheries really declare on the news today, like a very seemed like a very black and white view that the province is all for this, full steam ahead. That was at least the indication that I received. And I was kind of expecting that we were going to have more of a methodical rollout of information sharing, and then we would be pointed to subject matter experts and the scientific research that would validate that perspective. I was really surprised that there'd be a definitive, go move from the province. That really changed my view on the timing of when we as a council may want to weigh in one way or the other, and maybe some council members may not feel that weighing in is an appropriate mandate. But I think, to Councillor O'Neill's perspective, I would have thought even as late as Sunday that we were going to have several months to let this soak in, and I think we're going to be required to respond in weeks, not months. And so I think that the opportunity to go back to the province and seek clarification and seek information and seek, their subject matter expertise, like, I'm all for going to get that. I spoke to Councillor O'Neill about that would probably make some sense. I'm just not sure if they're going to be able to respond in a timely enough manner that's going to matter, especially if there's also already an extension, a request for an extension. By CERMAC. But I do believe that I do believe that we should write the province a letter asking for very specific information. And I think that, a subcommittee that could pull that letter together on behalf of the council, that's probably a reasonable way to proceed, and maybe to try to have that either, if not ready for the 11th, certainly by the 28th of February.
Okay, Councillor O'Neill, did you have
That's what Councillor Feeney has said is entirely consistent with my hope for that subcommittee, that there would be some real thought leadership on what information is relevant to Mahone Bay, and that would be required to satisfy us that the province does in fact have our best interests at heart.
And at least get them on the record,
Exactly.
formally declaring their position.
At the Mayor's Deputy CAOs on Monday just passed, the Executive Director for Fisheries and Aquaculture for the province spoke for about an hour. And he reiterated with some clarity the position of the province as it relates to aquaculture, the licensing process, the investigation process, the Aquaculture Review Board, the appeals to the Aquaculture Review Board's decisions. And I'm trying to think of the chap's name. I think it's Hancock. But if we could get him to come here, it would obviously have to be a session other than council, because he took at least an hour at Mayor's Deputy CAOs. But I think if you heard him speak, you would have a clear picture of where the province is coming from.
Okay.
That would,
So what I'm hearing is that the information that maybe this subcommittee would be seeking already exists and could be represented at a special session by invitation of this.
If we're
Representative?
interested to understand what the province of Nova Scotia's program is, this is the guy you want to hear from.
Is that the information you're hoping to find?
Yes, yes.
I'd supporting, so I support kind of the mayor's conclusion from the meeting on Sunday that it would be appropriate of this council to weigh in formally. I think we should weigh in, and each individual councillor can make the decision on where they want to be on that vote.
That's right.
But I do think we do need to weigh in. I'd prefer to have that vote after we had some formal declaration from the province on where they are. Today was the very first time that I saw anything in the media from that would really position where they were, and I was a bit surprised how how aggressively supporting the initiative of the province was. But I think if there was an opportunity to get that clarification, I'd prefer to have that before we vote as a council.
Okay. So then, as with relevance to your motion, for the 11th of February, we will plan to have had that gentleman here to spend an hour with us prior to the 11th of February.
That would be ideal.
Okay.
So in the event that can't be arranged, would you, because that's very soon,
Mhm.
you may not have time,
That's
would you defer that to the 27th and we'll just essentially
So
say
we'll
at the-
see how soon we
at the
can get
next
him.
meeting after, or do you still want it to be on the agenda even if we can't meet with it?
Or could we have we could have a joint session with maybe the other municipalities want to join us. Like one joint meeting for all the municipalities.
Yeah.
It sounds like he did present to, the mayor's wardens for that reason.
Is there a report out of that? Are there minutes of that
No,
session, or
there
are
are,
there?
and I discussed that with them on Monday. There are no minutes of mayors, deputies, CAOs. There are no motions. There are no decisions. However, if you look at your mayor's Facebook page, you'll see a link to a video where this gentleman, who is with one of the young ladies that was here the night Cermak was here, and he's basically giving the province's position in that video, which one of our citizens pointed out to me was originally put out in 2019. So the province's position, he's even got that paper that we have in the hall downstairs with the process scheduling for what happens with fish farm licenses.
Mhm.
But I've got his card at home. I don't have it with me. I'll contact the office to see if we can arrange for something ASAP.
That seems fine.
It does, and I feel, sooner rather than later, obviously, to Councillor Feeney's point, that this is happening perhaps more quickly than we will be able to respond to. And again, just to reiterate that the town is very clearly looking for leadership here, and I feel that this needs to be a priority.
So,
Councillor Carver?
yes, thank you. Closed meeting, open meeting, not a meeting, a discussion.
I think I would leave it up to the gentleman from the province. If he would feel that it should be a not for public meeting,
Then it's a discussion, it's not closed though.
then it becomes a discussion.
Invite other councils.
Well, if it's efficient,
We could, but we'd have to
facilitate
different
it.
location.
Like,
Mahone Bay Center's got space for us.
I mean, it's a function of trying to be helpful to one
Mhm.
individual who's probably making the rounds to 30
I
municipalities.
think if you're trying to have a fairly quick meeting as soon as possible, get all the councils.
Just do us. Okay.
Well, start with us and make,
We'll leave it to those councils to sort it out for themselves.
or alternatively, set our own date for our purposes
That's what I'm
and let them
getting
know.
The
invite
door is
them.
open
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
interested.
And to be fair, I mean, we're the last municipality that the proponent visited. I mean, we're kind of being brought into the game late, and we're catching up. So, but given the community interest on Sunday and then even this evening, I think we just need to have the relevant information from the party so that we can weigh in one way or the other.
know.
I think, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry,
I-
Councillor
I agree with this approach because while there's a part of me that just wants to say no, 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 I also feel it behooves us to get as much information.
That's right.
From both sides, all sides, so that we can really feel confident that we've explored it from all directions. So this works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I allowed to ask a question and make a comment?
Not until the end of the meeting.
Yeah, we are.
We're
We're
almost
decided.
there. We're almost
Pretty
there.
well.
Almost there.
Go ahead, Jeff. Ask
Yeah.
your-
I heard most of you talking, okay, and I support what you're saying, but with the lack of transparency we seem to see, okay, I think you're gonna get steamrolled, okay, personally. I think it would be appropriate if you consider making a statement saying, we're very concerned about this, we're not yes or no. We would like, it, I guess the word moratorium is not the right word, but put a hold on this until all the information is provided so that we can make a decision on what's best for our town. I think I always get nervous when I hear putting study groups together and stuff because they go on forever. I just have a bad sense of those things. I don't think we have that time. Okay, and I think as Councilor there said, there's a lot of very concerned people at that meeting, and if you guys don't, say it that way, you guys need to show that we heard this, and we're concerned and we're going to look out for you. I think the other side is very organized. Okay, and they're going to try and typically pick off communities. Okay, so I think you need to put something out there publicly. Hopefully, you can do something today as a statement saying we're very concerned. We'd like to see a halt until all the information is provided that we can make an informed decision. That way, it gives you your time.
Do you wish to withdraw your motion until we have the chat from the province, or would you still like to plan to your notice of intent? Not a motion.
Well, I would like to register a notice of motion.
Okay.
And I think it'll become clear. Do I need to register the specific motion notice now?
No, I know. No, but we will as part of that
Yeah.
that awareness process. We'll begin by having the provincial guru, the executive director. I understand he's one down from the minister or the deputy
Yeah.
minister. Have him come and talk with us.
Final comment, if I may. I think that I take the point, and we were in the meeting, and the mayor did speak very clearly about the level of concern that this council has, and I would hope that anyone who is doubting that level of concern takes a look at the video that was taken of the mayor addressing the residents in the
I
Mahone
got
Center.
copies here.
If I don't think you heard my comment. Maybe clear. I don't think it was any doubt about it.
Yeah. No, I would just, for those people who weren't there, I wanted to make it clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a notice of motion on the table for the 11th of February. I am going to contact the provincial department to see if we can get the executive director to come in and talk with us. And we'll do that, get him here as soon as we can get him here. Okay, and then we'll see where it leaves us from there. In the meantime, I don't know how much you use social media, but you can find both sides of the argument well displayed on, if you go to Twin Bays, you're going to get one side of it. But if you go to something like Google and you Google Cermaq or Aquaculture Norway or the ones on the West Coast, you'll see what's happening in those locations. Okay? Anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn? Oh,
Take a,
what is
we're
it?
gonna go and close this.
Yeah, I know, but we can't close that until we do that. Okay, motion to go in camera.
So moved, your worship.
Seconded? We're in camera. Okay.
And before we do,